Hey guys, and welcome. We're so glad you're here to join us for today's webinar. Today we get a chance to chat and pick Jeffrey Shaw's brain, which is fascinating. I've done it quite a few times. He's actually one of our favorite instructors here at PPA. I want to tell you a little bit about Jeff because there's so much more to him than just his photography. So Jeff is the popular business podcast of Creative Warriors. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I highly encourage you to hop on over there and pay attention, maybe sign up for that. He's also a nationally acclaimed keynote speaker. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a business coach for entrepreneurs. And recently, he's the author of the best-selling book, Lingo, Discover Your Ideal Customers' Secret Language and Make Your Business Irresistible. So on top of all those wonderful accolades, Jeff is fantastic. He's just been a fantastic educator and supporter of PPA and the photographic industry and people like you, entrepreneurs like you, because he cares so much about this industry. He's been a member of PPA since 1984. He had a very, very successful studio in New York City. And he really believes in paying it forward and helping fellow photographers understand their value, understand and own their professionalism, and really bring themselves to a place where they can have highly successful, profitable, sustainable businesses. He's also going to be one of our Bridging the Gap speakers at Imaging USA this year, which we're so excited to have him. And what more wonderful things can I say about my friend Jeffrey? He's just fantastic. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Angela. That was a stellar introduction, so thank you for that.
Well, you have been such a friend to us, and honestly a friend to all photographers because you do care so much. I mean, I feel like if I were to ask you, and I guess I will ask you, why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote it because I just think there's a different way to be in business. You know, I want people to be successful, no doubt, right? I mean, I want, everyone here to be successful. I want photographers to be successful. But if I really, we look for our why, right? If I really got underneath it all for my why, is I really want there to be a world where people feel seen, heard, and understood by businesses. Right, so we all have the unique experience as photographers of being both business owners and consumers. And I just encourage people to pay attention to how you feel as a consumer and what do you want from the world that you do business with, and then how can you create the world that you want by being in business in a way that's A, comfortable for you, and B, has the greatest impact on people's daily lives in a positive way. So yeah, I want everybody to be successful, but I think, entrepreneurs, by nature, we have the ability to have a huge impact on the outcome of our world. So I wrote the book because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to see if I could really change the way like a lot of creatives, I don't like the way business is taught typically. And it makes sense because the way business is typically taught is from the perspective of very logical thinking, left-brained people that see doing business in a certain way. And it's why so many creatives hate the business side, because they actually haven't been granted permission to do business in a way that's comfortable for them, and then given the tools to do business in a way that really leverages their natural creative strengths. So I felt like I had a different strategy. I had a strategy that would be more aligned with the way entrepreneurs are thinking today. So that inspired me to write the book. It's actually, the whole entire book is based on the creation of my photography business, my first 3 years of struggle and failure, and then recreating the business that I really needed to create to serve the people I wanted to serve. And it really all comes down to a pivotal story. Kind of the signature story is a one-day visit to Bergdorf Goodman, the exclusive department store in New York City. So for me, what's interesting about the book overall is that it's a 30-year-old story that's more relevant today than it's ever been. So that's why I wrote the book.
I love it. It's so, and it's so perfectly timed. This is timed and yet timeless, I also believe. You and I have talked quite a lot. We've been friends for quite a while, and We've talked a lot about, and now PPA is really talking a lot about this as well, kind of the gap that exists between consumers and photographers, and how we really need to bridge that gap. We really need to be understanding what our customers need and want so we can create those things that they need and want, right? And so I'm excited to kind of jump into that and talk with you a little bit more about exactly what your webinar is about. How did we end up with the gap? So kind of in your experience, how did we end up with this gap between consumers and photographers?
Yeah, and I love, Angela, I just love that PPA is doing this. I just cannot congratulate PPA enough for being bold enough to take on this topic, and then also to bring in speakers from outside the industry and mix it in with the industry speakers, because that's exactly what we need to do, right? We need to gain that fresh perspective. So huge kudos to PPA for being brave enough to do this. Gosh, and yes, there's a huge gap, and I think it is truly one of the biggest problems, right? So how did we end up here? Well, the industry has changed so much, right? So as industries change, the old way of doing business just simply doesn't work. And this has been, I think, one of the big challenges for photography, is that we're an old industry. So you go to imaging and you meet someone who's been in business for a year or not even in business yet, and you meet people who have been in business for 3 and 4 or 5 decades, right? So, and I'm also in the world of podcasting, and a quick observation I made when I started going to podcasting conventions is how different it was than imaging, because podcasting is so new, right? So these conventions have only been around for 1 or 2 years. So everybody's excited at a podcasting convention because nobody's been around long enough to see the downside. Where the photo industry, we've been around a long time as an industry. So what used to work just simply doesn't work anymore. So the industry has changed a lot. The other reason we end up with this gap is, so let me talk, I guess, about a couple of foundational reasons, and then we'll talk about the specifics. Foundationally, businesses are built backwards, right? And I don't know there's a way of changing this. It's just the nature of how businesses are built, particularly creative businesses and photographers, because the way businesses are born on ideas and built on ambition. As creatives, there's a really good chance as a photographer that you probably were told at some point that you were really good at taking pictures, and you started taking more pictures, and then somebody gave you the idea, or you thought, well, I could turn this into a business. So you turned it into a business, and then you spent the next 3 years or 3 decades trying to fit people into the business, because that's the way every business is built. Businesses are built on these ideas, and then people run around marketing to people, selling at people, trying to get people to fit into the business. Now, the right way to build a business, if one would be able to stop the inclination to build it backwards, but the right way to build a business is to know very deeply and clearly who you're building your photography business for, and then build it for them. Your systems, your processes, your workflow, your experiences, and your branding and marketing would be speaking specifically to the customers that you feel you are best to serve. So then you're creating a business that is not hunting down clients, but instead you've built a business that stands out like a beacon of light to your ideal customers. That would be ideal. It doesn't naturally happen that way, especially for creative businesses. So therefore, at any point, because you're struggling, because you're not getting the customers you want, you're not getting the most profitable customers, you're getting the customers that are asking you for discounts and all those things that annoy us, you can stop and say, well, how can I change this? And this is what I'm going to teach at Imaging, is a specific strategy and how you could change it. Okay, so one reason we end up with this gap is businesses are inherently built backwards. Secondly, as creatives, we are lofty thinkers. We're visionaries. We're creatives. Clarity is our biggest challenge. So actually getting our point across in our marketing is one of our greatest challenges, right? Because we have the ideas up here, but we don't. Our struggle is communicating it. And I've shared. You mentioned my TEDx talk. I've shared openly that I gave my TEDx talk this past March, but it was my 13th application. Right? Some people get them on their first attempt. It took me 13 times. And I'm open about that because the reason why is it took me 13 times to get really good at creating a clear message on the application that would allow the organizers to really get my concept. Clarity is one of our biggest challenges. I would say, Angela, fundamentally, probably one of the biggest reasons we end up with this gap between what we think people want and what they really want, or what we think we're saying and what they're hearing. Probably the biggest reason today is because we used to think that the world changed fast and people changed slow, but it's actually the other way around now. People change fast, and the world, particularly the world of businesses, is slow to change with it. People's values change so quickly, and this is really important for photographers. Let's just take one value, the value of time. Now, I've always been on the high end of photography. In order to justify my high rates, I used to talk about how long the sessions were, 3-hour sessions. First of all, there was a pre-session consultation to come in and talk about clothing. There's an hour of time. It was a 3-hour portrait session. Then you were going to wait a couple weeks, and then you'd come in and see proofs at my gallery, and that's another hour and a half. And then you're going to wait 6 weeks for this beautiful handcrafted quality photography, right? So time, giving a lot of time, and things taking a long time were a justifier for the price.
Yeah, they used to actually teach that a great deal, like the amount of
Yeah,
face time you had with someone equaled the dollars they would spend with you, or they didn't value your craft if you could do it
right,
quickly.
right.
They felt like it.
Now, right, nowadays people will pay you more to save them time.
Yeah.
So I think this is an important thing for photographers. I still see a lot of photographers. Now, again, I do want to clarify something here, that what we're talking about is lingo, right? And I'm going to speak about this as what I think is probably true of the greater percentage of the customers that you might be serving, but it's not true for everyone, right? So I think the majority of photographers, if you're still talking about how long everything takes, you might be losing a lot of your clients. Now, that's not, there may be some areas that still resonates. That's still the lingo of that customer. But by and large, most people are really busy today. So if, as a photographer, if you're stressing how long everything's going to take, you may not be doing yourself any favors. So, I know the last thing I'm going to do is talk about a 3-hour portrait session. I actually frame our portrait sessions where I say it can be as quick as you need it to be and as thorough as you'd like it to be. Right? So I know I leave 2.5 hours on the calendar, but it could be 45 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be an hour and a half, it could be 2 hours. What I find most clients, here's the catch though, I find most clients today are drawn to the shorter session. Again, imagine the lingo of the mom. What is she thinking? She's thinking she can't get her kids to sit still for 10 minutes. If I'm talking about a 2 or 3 hour portrait session, that seems so overwhelmingly daunting. She's more likely to choose another photographer who says that they're going to do the session or a mini session or a session in an hour. So, because don't forget, that mom is thinking she can't get her kids to sit still for 10 minutes. Now, what we know as photographers is most children are going to behave better for us than they do their parents, right?
Yeah.
They usually do, and we are good at what we do, and we keep them engaged. But mom's not thinking that yet. She's just thinking that sounds really daunting. I think this value of time is a really important one, and I always ask photographers to question whether they really want to stress how long. I know we want to create great experiences. We want them to come in and have a dramatic experience seeing the proofs with wine and cheese or whatever, but I ask people to really question, is that the lingo of the people you're serving? Is that really what they want? The most significant change I made in my business in 2008, so we're going back 10 years ago now, and it was not fashionable at the time then, and it's for a lot of photographers it's not fashionable now, but the biggest change I made in my business because of this nature of time was I went completely to remote sales. I stopped having clients come into my gallery. I could see that asking them to give up that time in the evening was a stressor and not a pleasant experience. So I switched to remote sales, providing an online gallery and then a screen share. And my sales went up. My sales were in half the amount of time. And I believe it's because I was addressing their fundamental need, their lingo, to not have things take so much time in their lives. So I think we really have to look at how people's lives change, how their values change. Are they valuing, time as a value? Are they valuing some of the things you're saying and you're promoting? Is it really what they want? And I think we always have to stay on our toes and question that, because what people want and what they value changes so quickly today. So
Yeah.
that I think is probably the biggest reason in the gap, because it comes right down to finite words, right? I mean, I used to promote my work. My work is quite posed, and I used to promote that I photographed in a traditional style. Well, the word traditional today just kind of sounds old. So the interpretation of using the word traditional in marketing our work, you have to question, is that in their lingo? Is that how they want to see it? Or is it just sounding like you've been around a long time, which I had been, but I don't want to be perceived as the photographer that's been around a long time. I want to be perceived as the photographer that's current and able to meet their needs today.
So I'm curious, and we're getting a couple questions in on this real quick. Jeff, if you don't mind going into a
Sure.
question here real quick.
Love to.
So in-person sales. So you don't do any in-person sales. When you put stuff online, are you walking them through it? Are you doing that together? Or
Yeah.
is that something that you're allowing them to do on their own?
So I first provide an online gallery so that they can look at their choices together. And I say they is because it's hard to get husbands and wives in the same room today. So let them do that on their own time. Let them figure that out. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, they can finally get together. So I give them an online gallery for 2 weeks. And I'm very strict about that 2 weeks, by the way, and they know that. And I actually, when I let them know I'm going to put their proofs online, I'm very strict on it. I said, look, I said, I'm very agreeable in a lot of ways, but there's no movement on. Like, it's 2 weeks and that's it. So, but what I do is when I provide the link to the online gallery, I actually give them dates for a screen share meeting 1 week later. So I'm actually starting a week before the deadline to get them in queue. And then we do a screen share. So I actually use GoToMeeting and do a screen share. So they've seen a gallery, they've chose their favorites. We're hopping online. We're not looking at all 50 proofs that I provide, or we might only be looking at 15. And then I help them make decisions on either to narrow down those 15 or how to use each of those 15 poses or whatever they've ended up with. So they're still getting a tremendous amount of guidance. And I think that's the thing that's been misinterpreted that's why I refer to it as remote sales, right? Because you are servicing your clients with the same degree of depth and customer service. You're just doing it remotely. You're not face to face per se.
So there's a question coming in. Corey wants to know, everyone says the longer they see the images before ordering, the smaller the order will be. Can you address that?
I guess I would ask, why would the reason, why? I guess I'm stammering because I'm like, why would that be? I think that's kind of I think it's a little bit of an old school thought. I know it, I get it. It used to be that we wanted to kind of ride that emotion. But I don't think there's any real basis to that. I don't think if people are falling less in love with the images that quickly, I just don't think that's the case.
Well, and I think it probably goes back to the front end of things too, because people coming to you, they know that what they're looking to purchase as you're developing and going through even before the session. So it's not really a question of whether or not they're going to buy, right?
Right. Or right. It's not whether they're going to buy, but it's probably what they're going to buy. And you want to keep them in the stage of what they want to buy. So for example, when I do put the proofs online, I encourage my clients to choose their favorites. And I also give them a little incentive for those favorites by telling them that I'll create a mobile app from all their favorites. So don't narrow it down too small. I don't want them to make finite choices without me being present. I want them to narrow it down so I'm not having to sit there and painfully watch husband and wives go back and forth endlessly about which one of the kids is better. So they've done all that on their private time. So by the time, but I don't want them to cull it down so far that there aren't enough for me to guide them as to what they want. So they definitely, by hiring you, they've made a purchasing decision as far as they're going to purchase, but I don't want them to make a finite decision on what they're going to purchase, because that's where our expertise as photographers come in. I don't go to the doctors and tell him what medicine I want. I go to him telling him my ailment and want the doctor, him or her, to tell me what medicine I should take. And as photographers, we need to show up the same way. It's like get them in the atmosphere and environment of making a purchasing decision, but then we need to guide them because we really know what's best for them as far as the sizes and combination of portraits they should have. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
think,
the emotions wane off. I don't think the emotions wane off like they're going to suddenly fall out of love with the images.
yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that's one of those things, and I've said this before on pretty much all the time. If one thing is true, the opposite can also be true. And so some people would say, I do in-person sales because I want to ride that wave and I want to do this, and they build their business that way and it works for them. And yet I love that you can show us the exact opposite and that be completely true for who you are. And I think it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, which is that you design the business based on what you want what your customers want and need, and you become that beacon of light to that ideal customer who wants to do business the way that you're offering.
Absolutely. That's the whole point. It is, what is the lingo of your customers? And I just want to challenge people to not make assumptions that they think of that they're addressing the lingo of their customers. I want you to really know the lingo of your customers so that you're creating the business that they want, not the business you want to give them. And that right there, I think, is a big difference. Like, what is the business they want, not what is the business you want to create that you want to give them. And that comes down to experiences too. I address this in Lingo, by the way, because I think people are mixed up because we've heard about. And again, very true in the photography business. We've been talking about our clients needing to have a great experience. And as photographers, we've concentrated a lot on creating a great experience. I just ask people to take a moment and question, have you created the experience that you want people to have, or have you created the experience that people that you understand they want?
That is, yeah. I mean, that's your book. That is the core of what you're going to be talking about, imaging, and we could have that conversation for days because it is backwards. It is backwards, and we learn things, and sometimes the first thing you learn is what you hold to be true, and so you take everything else after that and you measure it against that piece. And I think what you're encouraging people to do is to start fresh.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly, and. My book being called Lingo, what I'm really focusing on is the messaging gap, right? So I'll tell you, I just recently I spoke at an event and I was on a podcast, and in both cases, and actually I'm gonna offer this to the folks listening today, an opportunity for me to review your website, do a quick review of your website. It'll be my free gift to everybody here. I offered this gift at a speaking engagement recently and on a single podcast that I was on, and in both cases, I offered it to the first 50 people who would fill out a quick application. It takes like 2 to 3 minutes to fill out this application. And the application asks questions like, whom do you think your ideal client is? What do you think their top 3 values are? What is it that you offer? So it doesn't take a long time to fill it out. So what I did is for 100 websites, I had 100 people fill out the application, and then I went and visited their website to see if they were getting across what they intended on getting across on their website. 98 out of 100 websites, I had more than enough that I could share with them and how they needed to change their website. There was a major gap. Like, they would write out the right things. They would write out why they do what they do. They would write out on the application what they believe the values are for their clients. I would go to their website and I don't see any of that. And that's why I'm addressing the branding and marketing issue of the lingo gap to close the gap between businesses and their customers. It's because that's your branding and marketing is your gateway. If they don't get you, and let me break that down. Why is that so important today? Well, for one, there's more noise in the marketplace than there's ever been. There's so much competition in photography. There's competition just in noise, right? Because we're all so bombarded with so much stuff. So there's a lot more noise. People have a lot shorter attention span. And here's probably the biggest logical reason that people are overlooking. More than 70% of people going to your website are on a mobile device. People on mobile devices don't change pages, right? In fact, it's such a critical thing. Google now ranks websites based on page load time. So if visitors to your website are going to interior pages and it's taking a long time for that page to load, Google is deranking your website. So This idea of what I call front-facing branding is more important than ever. Front-facing branding is getting your message across to your ideal customers in a way that they find it so compelling, they're drawn to working with you and hiring you, but getting that across in seconds on your homepage. It's not they will not likely go to interior pages. And one of the biggest problems I see with photographers' websites, and I review a lot of them, is that what's on the homepage is just their images. And as beautiful as the images are, you can't rely entirely on the quality of your work to create the relationship that's going to inspire them to hire you. And they're not likely to go to interior pages. A quote I use all the time, Angela, is people don't hire you because you're the best. And this is true today. It wasn't true 20 years ago, I will tell you. But today, people don't hire you because you're the best. They hire you because they feel like you get them. It builds a relationship. And that's why this idea of how much can you speak their lingo on their homepage and how quickly can they understand what you stand for, who you stand up for, and do it in a compelling way, it has to happen in seconds in order to convert that lead, that visitor to your website to a client. But that's one of the biggest reasons for the gap, is because that's changed on how we need to get our message across so quickly.
So let me ask you this question. What if you're not your client?
We usually aren't. And that's a great question. I love this question. And actually, I had to really think about this recently because somebody didn't challenge me, but brought up a point I thought was really interesting. Okay, so let me break that down a little bit. In business, in marketing, we've been hearing a lot about for years talking about buyer personas and avatars. The problem I have with buyer personas and avatars is they are by definition a projection of who we think our ideal customer is, but actually our ideal customers are more likely to be a reflection of who we are. That can get confusing because of what you just said. Well, what if we're not our customer? And we usually aren't, right? So especially in service-based businesses, we almost always are serving a clientele that's living a lifestyle that's out of where the league that we are in order for them to afford to hire us, right? And then we hire people that are affordable to us. That's just the way economics goes, especially in service-based businesses. The way in which they're a reflection of you, it does not mean that you live like them. Believe me, I never have and never will live like my photography clients. Don't desire to, really. It's not that you live like them. It's not that you're the same demographic. They are your ideal customers, the people you're meant to serve, are a reflection of your values, right? You think similar to them. You value the same thing. Obviously, as photographers, we value the powerful emotional impact of having photographs to hand down, right? Preserving moments. Your clients are a reflection of people that also value that. So real quick, I just give you a side-by-side comparison, and it is the foundational story in Lingo. I went back to my hometown to start my photography business in 1984 after I got out of photography school. Struggled and ultimately failed after 3 years of trying to get that business to work because I was promoting what I valued as a photographer. I valued having photographs to hand down from generation to generation and the importance of preserving children's memories. And I was saying this to a community of people where I grew up, my hometown, that were struggling to pay their rent that month. So I wasn't speaking their lingo. We didn't share the same values. They may have loved photography, but they couldn't afford it. And it didn't have a high enough value to them to be able to, I mean, they're not going to sacrifice putting food on their table for photographs, right? So that's when I recognized I was speaking the wrong lingo. And I realized, well, who shares my values? Who shares my values were affluent people who had discretionary income. It wasn't just that they had the money to spend. It's that by being people of financial means, I understood their values, because when you have money, money's not an excuse. So they could afford to pay for their kids' college education in advance. They could afford to pay for photographs that would get handed down to the next generation. So I'm a reflection of them in our values, having nothing to do with I don't live anything or remotely like them. So that's an important distinction, and I think it's becoming more important because we of course have this huge buying power of millennials coming through, and we want to understand their perspective. We want to understand what they're feeling and thinking. That doesn't mean millennials don't have to serve millennials, right? So, but you do need to understand their perspective in order to serve them.
So that one of the questions I get a lot in the business challenge has to do with pricing and people being very uncomfortable charging, even when we go to the very basic of what profitability and sustainability looks like, and being able to say confidently, this is what I charge, because they feel like they wouldn't buy it. So how could they, convince someone else to do that? And I say convince with air quotes, just because they feel like it's a sell and they have to be salesy or pitchy. Or so can you just talk a little bit about kind of owning, how someone can really own their value, and maybe how the language then also will help support them to speak with confidence.
Yeah, gosh, so great, because I think it is one of the biggest gaps, right? So first of all, you have to understand that pricing creates perception. So the first thing when I speak to my clients and we're talking about pricing, the first thing I ask them is, how do you want your business to be perceived? Right? That's the fundamental question, because how you price yourself, both in the dollar amount and even how it looks, right, gives a perception. And one of the biggest gaps I see in businesses is that, as photographers, is they claim when they reach out to me that they're a high-end business, high-end photography studio, or whatever it is that they're doing. But then I look at their website, and their website feels much higher volume, low end, and then their pricing is creating the wrong perception, right? So the fact of the matter is, you have to be perceived as quality and high end, you have to be priced high enough, and you have to own that, right? Because I'll bet everyone here on the call has at some point chosen to not buy something because it wasn't priced high enough, and therefore we perceived it as being poor quality. That is not how you want people to perceive your photography, unless it is, right? If you're low price, high volume, then price accordingly. But that's the point. Pricing, and I know photographers have such a hard time with this because we're all afraid that pricing is going to deter people. And it should deter the wrong people, but it should be a magnet and attract the right people. If you want higher end photography clients, then you have to price accordingly. Now, I'm looking real quick at how many people are on this webinar, because I don't often tell the story I'm about to tell because I don't want it to get too far out there. But for photographers, I think you'll really relate to this. So when I was starting my photography business in my hometown, I intended on it being a high-end photography business because that's how I perceived the value of what I wanted to offer. So I charge $48.02 for an 8x10. Okay, it's already a really weird number, but I know, $48.02. Never occurred to me to round up to $50, but I had learned in photography school, I learned a formula: cost of goods, overhead, do some multiplication, and I followed it verbatim, and that's what the mathematical equation, and that's what I went with. Now, after 3 years of struggling, when I decided to reinvent myself as a photographer and rebrand, and I was recreating my business 2 hours away in Connecticut as opposed to New York, where I was originally from. So there was a 3-month overlap. There was a 3-month period of time when I was kind of shutting down one business that wasn't working and reopening, relaunching the business that I was going towards. And for those 3 months, I was in this weird situation of charging $48.02 for an 8x10 in my hometown where I started my business, and $300 for the same 8x10 in the market I was launching. And think about that. It was basically the same 8x10. I upgraded the mounting a little bit, and it was packaged nicer. But it's basically the same 8x10. If I charged $48.02 in the market where I was headed towards, it would never have made sense because it would not have spoken to being high enough quality. It was also Walmart style pricing, $48.02. It wasn't even rounded off to a whole number, which that already speaks a difference. Like, on lower end, Walmart charges by the 100th of a cent. Higher end stores round off the numbers. So it was a great learning lesson, though. As uncomfortable as it was the power of the perception of pricing, because if I charged anything less than $300 for a single 8x10, I would not have gained the perception that I wanted to as a high-end photographer serving an affluent clientele. So regardless of what the dollar amount is, I'm not saying you have to charge a lot, or that's entirely, again, it's what is the right lingo of your ideal clients. But do understand the power you have to create the perception you want your business to be perceived as by how you price yourself. And to me, and I say this to photographers and creatives all the time, and this is what I fight for as a business coach, is your success. Because if you don't have a successful business model and pricing yourself by what you're worth, my fear is that you can't create a sustainable business, and you're going to have to give up on your gift, which is a loss to everyone that you could serve. So the number one reason to charge what you're worth is so that you can keep giving what you're so good at doing, and don't ever sacrifice that.
Oh, thank you. That's so encouraging. I hope you guys are all taking that to heart, because there's so much truth in that statement. So Lenora says, she said she just ordered her copy of Lingo from Amazon.
Thank you.
Ka-ching, there's one. She wants to know, do you discuss what words are better than others to use when trying to convey quality, worth, while also saving your clients time?
Say that again. I want to make sure I'm understanding the question.
Yeah, do you, in your book, do you discuss what words are better than others to use when you're really trying to convey your quality or your value?
I don't know that. So we're fortunate that we have another GAP speaker, Phil Jones, who will address that beautifully at Imaging. His book is Exactly What to Say, and it is a book about exactly what to say in various circumstances. So Lingo is more, I'd say, conceptual than that. Like, I'm not giving you side-by-side comparisons as Phil does in his book, where in Lingo, I'm trying to stress the point as to why you want to own your value and your worth, more so than the individual words. But,
great examples in your book. You have fantastic examples in your book of times, like your Bergdorf Goodman story.
I love that you can't say that, and I'll tell you why in a second, but go ahead.
That really is part of what she's asking, I think, and it's a mindset, right?
It is a mindset. Yeah, it is. So the reason I love that you struggle to say Bergdorf Goodman is, and I actually have stood outside there and taken video. One of the points I like to stress is that, so if you're not familiar, Bergdorf Goodman is an exclusive department store. It's 8 stories high. It's on 59th Street. It's on Fifth Avenue at 59th Street in New York City. One of the busiest intersections in the city, if not the world. Tens or hundreds of thousands of people walk by it every day and don't even know it's there. And I love that, because it's a really important business lesson for all of us, is that none of us are for everybody. So here's a business that is in one of those prominent, visually prominent places in the world, and so many people don't even know it's there. And it's also, when I see people stammering over the name, it's like, of course, because if I say Bergdorf Goodman, I can say it, I'm so comfortable there. Like, it's my place, right? But if that's not your place, that's why people stumble on it. And I love that, right? Because it becomes a really strong indicator. It's like, that's not a world that you've really spent a lot of time in. But people that go there, obviously it rolls off their tongue, right? So the specifics of that, so I'll real quickly kind of tell that story. Again, my business was failing. I did thankfully come to the awareness that I was meant to serve a more affluent clientele because of our values were going to be aligned. But the problem was I didn't know their world, right? I grew up lower middle class, kind of at best. I did not know the world of affluent people. I didn't know their lingo, but I felt that I could learn it, and I didn't want to learn what businesses did as much as I wanted to learn the world of people that went to businesses that were going to be similar to mine. So I went to Bergdorf Goodman, not to study the business per se, but to understand if I were a customer, and this is what I encourage everybody to do, is step into the world of your ideal customer. And if I were this affluent person going to the store, can I remove everything I previously know and judge about myself and just imagine I am an ideal customer of this store? How does it look? How does it feel? What's the lighting look out like? How are things structured? I wanted to understand what the experience was, how I perceived everything. So that's why I went there. I was 23 years old. I had $20. That was it, right? I had $20 in my pocket. That's all the money I had to spend, which sounded good until I walked in the store and realized there isn't a ball of dust in this store that's going to cost less than $20. I mean, it's just incredible. You walk in and, like I said, I feel like I landed on a different planet. But I went up to the 7th floor, which is housewares or home accessories, I think they call it, thinking there's got to be something in home accessories that I can afford for $20. And it had to include New York City sales tax because that's all I had. I found this really small candle, a votive candle, and that was under $20, including sales tax, and I asked for it to be gift wrapped. Now, one thing that stood out to me as I encountered my experience at the store was I realized that I had to look really out of place. The way I was dressed, the way I was carrying, I felt like I must have looked really out of place, and yet I was never treated like I was out of place, right? I was treated right from the moment. And when I asked for this candle to be gift wrapped, she actually escorted me over to the gift wrap department. She didn't just point in a direction. She literally walked me over to the gift wrap department. A turning point moment in my life was when I asked for this candle to be gift wrapped, and the woman proceeded to show me how to do it. And what she did is she took the candle and put it in a lot of tissue paper, like wads and wads of tissue paper. And then she went to go put it into Bergdorf Goodman's signature silver metallic box. And as she did that, she stopped, like completely stopped, looked up at me, and she said, "Don't use any tape." That just puzzled me. I didn't understand why she was making such a point of not using any tape. So of course I had to ask, right? Why can't I use any tape? She went on to explain that she put the top of the box and then she tied the box closed with a purple ribbon. And she went on to explain that when the customer gets this home, since it's being gift wrapped, before they give it as a gift, they're going to untie the bow, take off the box top, unfold the tissue paper to make sure the candle is in perfect shape. Because you could say that part of the lingo of this affluent clientele is that they're perfectionists, right? And they would be horrified to give a gift that was broken. So before they give a gift, they're going to make sure it's in perfect shape before they hand it over. Now, if you used any tape when wrapping that candle in the tissue paper, you would have had to tear the paper in order to undo the tape. And as simple as that was, I realized how bizarrely powerful it was in knowing that, because no tape was like a secret lingo of high-end brands. This store understood the depth of their customers so well. They knew not only the behavior in the store, but how the customer was going to behave when they got home and what life looked like to them, that they knew that they're going to untie this. And to this day, I package all my portraits just like that. Every individual, and I also box my portraits individually. When I'm taking the portrait order, I'm asking my clients, who's this 8x10 for? Who's this wall portrait for? And they're telling me it's for Aunt Mary, it's for Grandma. I get all the names and I individually box every portrait tagged with that recipient's name. And if it's a small portrait in a box, the box is tied closed with a ribbon, and inside it's wrapped in tissue paper with no tape. Because that's an indicator to my clients I know their world. I haven't used any tape. It's so simple, but that unleashed my curiosity to start studying what else don't I know. And that's what I'm encouraging all of you to do, is just stop and question, what else don't you know about the world of your ideal customers, whether you're currently working with those customers or not. And if you're not, who is the world of customers that's waiting for you to show up, that you are meant to serve? And be curious about what you don't know about them, because you don't know what you don't know right now. Right? It sounds silly, but you don't know what you don't know right now. But if your clients are at a different place in life than you are, you don't know their world. It's your homework to understand their world so that you can build a business that speaks to them.
So I have one last question for you, Jeff. Thank you so much for your time today. And this is going back just a little bit. And Ray's asked a question, and I think it's part of what I want us to talk about. What she's asked is, if you know your why, how do you then use that why to market value to your ideal clients? And part of that discussion is going back to something you said at the very beginning, which is that you don't build a business based on what you want to give them. You build a business based on what they want or need. But we're artists, and we have a style, or we have a passion, or we have this thing that we want to share with the world. So how do you marry those two concepts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know what? We do have a style. And probably one of the biggest struggles I faced as a photographer was I was probably 15 years into my business, as the business I had recreated for this high-end clientele. About 15 years in, and this what seemed to be the style of what people wanted was dramatically changing, because I was known as a photographer doing, large-scale wall portraits in color, and my style is pretty posed, right? And along came this wave of photographers that were doing black and white, very candid. And I questioned whether I had a place in the world anymore. And it was the first time I felt completely threatened as a photographer. And I actually remember showing up to a former assistant's Christmas party and saying to her, "I'm 39 years old and I'm done. I'm a wash up. Like, nobody's going to want what I have." Absolutely distressed, because it was a difficult holiday season. And I really felt like, that's it. I'm now irrelevant, because the world seemed to want candid black and white, and that's not my style. Well, how I think you can marry that, for one, I allowed that to stretch me a little bit, right? I never converted to only photographing black and white. I love color, to be honest with you. So I didn't convert to changing my style, but I allowed it to expand my style a little bit. I still maintained my standard of creating the pose portraits that people are going to want to hang on their wall for years. But I started shooting more candidly in between the poses, providing my clients with a storytelling aspect that they might put into an album, or those might be some of the 5x7s. So, creatively, things can come along that create fear for us, because we don't know, it's not our style. We don't know if the world wants it anymore. But we do have to stick to the core of our style, but you can allow those opportunities to expand your strength a little bit more. Now, the thing about the why, I have a little bit of a different take on it, right? I think it's important that we know our why, and I find most photographers can get there pretty easily, because we are by nature soul-seeking people. So I find most photographers are pretty clear on their why. Here's what I challenge you to unearth, which I think will serve you much better, both in your own knowing, and it's far more marketable, which is, what is your unique perspective on why you do what you do? How do you look at because there are a million boudoir photographers and high school senior photographers. But I do believe fundamentally that everybody has a different unique perspective. What I say in Lingo, I say something in Lingo, actually I'm going to correct when we reprint it, which is in the book. I say that your unique perspective on why you do what you do is as unique as your DNA. It's actually more unique than your DNA. Right? And I say that because think about siblings in the same family and how we can all have a different perspective on the same childhood, right? So how we look at why we do what we do is so unique, because it's a combination of our experiences, our heart, our feelings, our why. What I challenge everyone to consider is, how do you look at what you do differently than everybody else? You have your why, but what's really important about why you do what you do, and how can you communicate that to people that get that, right? That they feel like, yeah, I totally get that's an important value. That's the challenge. I think your why is a nice to have. It is hard to marry your why with people who are going to care, because the why is about ourselves. But if you can figure out what your unique perspective on why you are the photographer that you are, why photographing and capturing people in your style, why that's important to you, right? I mean, my highest value is responsibility. That is truly what, that's just the way I live my life. I've had life insurance since I was 19 years old. I pay every bill before I get on an airplane, which is constant, right? But I don't want anything, I just, responsibility is like, encompasses my life. It is the perfect value to align with the clientele that I serve because they also live that same way, right? Every T is crossed, every I is dotted. That's the way they live. So my photography style reflects that because I photograph in a way that I'm responsible not just for the emotional moment now, but is it a portrait that's going to stand up to the next generation? All right, because I want to be responsible. I want to help that family be responsible to their children's adulthood. So there's a way in which all this marries. So my unique perspective about photography and my business is I want to help parents be the most responsible parents they can be. Now, in 34 years, not one person has ever contacted me and said, "Can you help me be a responsible parent?" But that's my unique perspective on why I'm a photographer. Why I'm a photographer is, we can unpack that all day. But my unique perspective on why I'm a photographer is because I believe wholeheartedly that I want to help people be responsible to their children and to their children's future. And that's a different perspective than what another photographer might say. That's what's most uniquely marketable, is your unique perspective.
That's wonderful. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. There's a couple other things I just want to mention. One, we do have quite a few people asking about the website review.
Sure.
Is that something that...
Yeah. So I would look, may I offer everyone, I would love for you all to take a few action steps. Hopefully I'm going to see all of you or most of you at imaging, and I can't wait. There's a few things I would love for you to do between now and then. Fair enough? Okay. So one is, yes, I will review your website. Just go to lingoreview.com. So again, it's Lingo Review.
I'm going to pull it up here if that's okay, real quick.
Sure. So it's lingoreview.com. That's where the application is. You fill that out. It's going to come directly to me. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to I'll email you a few suggestions on what you might change in your website. So that I'd love for you to take advantage of that. What you can do between now, there are a few things that you can do between now and January. One is wipe the slate clean of what you think you know about your ideal customers, and without judgment, without assumption, really step into their world, right? What brands are they currently interacting with? What are they doing online? What blogs are they reading? What really, just be them, right? Step into their world, their presence, understand what life looks like from their perspective, and have fun with that. Make that your homework for the next 3 months, that you become the people you want to serve. And if they're younger than you, older than you, wealthier, not as wealthy, whatever it is, live their life. Have fun with it, role play, and give yourself the opportunity to really understand what the world looks like from their perspective. And if you do that, my presentation in January will make a lot more sense to you. And then lastly, please do subscribe to Creative Warriors, right? We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all of them. Any place you listen to podcasts, listen to Creative Warriors. And this is so, I really want to stress this for photographers, because Creative Warriors is not a podcast specifically for photographers. And I was very intentional in that, because I believe, as PPA is demonstrating, you all believe as well, that perhaps the best way for us to move the industry forward is to look also outside of the industry and then bring what we can learn back into our beautiful industry. So I created Creative Warriors as a podcast that really is meant for business people that are in creative businesses, right? Creative thinkers, innovators. But believe me, the inside scoop is, I know where I come from. I come from photography. A huge percentage of my audience are still photographers. So I have guests that seemingly have nothing to do with photography, but don't think for a moment that I don't have you in mind as a photographer. So I believe Creative Warriors between now and January could be a great resource for you, because I'm thinking about you all when I'm choosing the guests, when I'm creating the questions I'm going to ask, when I'm having the conversation. I just want to address the questions that might be on your mind. And believe me, I am often thinking, how would a photographer interpret this? How could a photographer make value of what we're talking about? So although it's not a designated photography podcast, it is built for you, just like a business should be. It was built for you, and hopefully you'll find that I'm speaking your lingo.
And that's a great segue, because the last thing I wanted to do was to thank you, because for those of you who will be at Imaging USA, Jeffrey is actually a huge reason why we have some of the speakers, some of the fantastic speakers that we have in the Bridging the Gap track. Being from outside the industry himself now, he's one of those, he's a bridge himself. He is 1 foot in the photography world and 1 foot in the speaker world, which is a whole other world in and of itself. But he was integral in helping us find some of the fantastic speakers like Phil M. Jones and Mike Michalowicz and Brant Menswar and Jeff Fromm.
And Michael Barber.
Michael Barber. Thank you.
They're all my friends, so I know them by name.
So it's wonderful, the lineup at Imaging USA this year. You don't even have to be a photographer to get amazing things out of it. They all are speaking to you as entrepreneurs, as business people, and it's going to be really, really fantastic. So Jeff, thank you so much for all of the help that you gave us in that as well.
My pleasure. I'm just excited. I love where this is all going, not only for PPA, but I think the best conversations photographers could be having is just thinking broadly, thinking differently, and we're well on our way. So congratulations to you for doing it, and then everyone who's here. Glad you showed up.
Awesome. All right, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We had some great comments. I do want to tell you, Jeff, you have lots of love coming in. Quite a few comments about what a wonderful presentation. People who've seen you speak at other events, like Minnesota PPA is one of them that came in, and you're always so helpful and provide useful information. So lots of love coming your way. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you at Imaging USA.
I can't wait to be there. I'll see you then.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye.